Hello, and welcome to this session on customizing map legends. When communicating the results of your spatial analysis, you'll often find that mapping data is a key part of sharing your findings. In Designer, this will likely include using the Report Map tool. And while the Report Map tool can create and output a legend as part of the map reporting snippet that you'll produce, you may find that you want to customize this legend to more clearly communicate the information that you've mapped. It might be small, but the importance of a map legend shouldn't be underestimated, especially when you're layering multiple spatial objects on a single map, or creating a thematic map to display categorical or numeric variables associated with the spatial object. To make sure that you're communicating the significance of your findings as clearly as possible, you'll want to include a legend as part of your map's output. But for an even more impactful and more polished-looking visual asset, you might consider customizing the text that is displayed as part of the legend. By the end of this session, you'll have checked off 3 goals for successfully customizing map legends. 1, you'll have a better understanding of the legend output methods from the Report Map tool. 2, you'll learn some methods for customizing the text and the order of the text that's displayed in the map legend. And then finally, you'll see how to place a legend on the map in locations for optimal clarity and map readability. Customizing a map legend requires 3 main processes. First, you'll need to output the map legend from the Report Map tool, and we'll explore the ways in which a map legend can be produced and output as its own snippet with that Report Map tool. Then, to edit the text and order the text found in the legend, you'll need to use some of the least frequently used tools in the reporting tool palette: the legend splitter to convert the legend snippet into usable and editable data values, and the legend builder to compile your edited text back into a snippet. And then finally, you'll want to place the legend onto the map in a location where it's not blocking important visual information using the overlay tool. Before we dive into Designer and show you how this is all going to work, let's take a deeper look first into the specific tools from the reporting tool palette that we're going to need today for working with map legends. In order to have a legend, you'll need to create a map with the Report Map tool. For those familiar, the Report Map tool's configuration walks you through 4 tabs. The first one is Settings, where you'll set the dimensions, resolution, and the scope of your map. The next tab, the Data tab, is where you connect to and configure the spatial objects that you want to map from your incoming data streams. That tab allows you to also specify any grouping, labeling, or thematic fields to apply. And in the Layers tab, you'll customize the symbology, like the type of point or the colors that you might want to use to display spatial objects, and any associated thematic field values, whether they be numeric or categorical. The final and most important tab for today's session is the Legend tab. This is where you specify the output method of the legend, or its position, as well as the style of the text, icons, and the background color that's used on the legend. Take note of the drop-down option for the position of the legend. For customizing legends, you'll want to output the legend as its separate field, which then creates the map legend as its own reporting snippet. We'll definitely be revisiting this particular tab when we explore this tool further in Designer. When customizing legends, you'll go through 2 processes. First, splitting a legend, and then putting it all back together using the Legend Splitter tool and then the Legend Builder tool. The Legend Splitter tool's configuration is simple. Choose the column of data that contains the reporting snippet of the map legend, and this is why it's so important in the Report Map tool to output that legend as its separate field. It needs to be an option that can be selected in the Legend Splitter tool. The Legend Splitter tool outputs the values, in this case the text, contained in the map legend as data values, which then you can modify using expressions or different parsing techniques. Once your modifications are complete, use the Legend Builder tool to reconstruct your map legend as a reporting snippet. In the Legend Builder tool, all you have to do is just select the matching columns of data using the drop-downs. Then, the Legend Builder tool just repackages your modified legend values into a reporting snippet that can be used later down the line when you're actually building your report. To place the legend back on your map, use the Overlay tool. The Overlays tool configuration has two options to select, the base field and the overlay fields. In the overlay tool configuration, choose the base layer first. That typically will be your map. Then select a quadrant where you'd like to place another reporting snippet, in this case your legend. Use the dropdown in that particular location in one of the quadrant boxes to then select the reporting snippet to lay on top of that base layer. In this case, the legend will be placed on the bottom left-hand corner of the report map snippet. Now let's see what this all looks like in Alteryx Designer. Let's open the workflow and build this out. The data that we'll be working with today is all about metro stations located across Southern California. And this dataset has a few important pieces of information that we're going to use for mapping purposes for today's session. Just to get familiar with our data, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're working with. In our first column here, we have the station name. That's the actual name of the metro station, as well as the station ID. It's just a 3-letter code that represents that particular station. Station ID is something that we're going to want to place on our map to be a label, something that's easily identifiable to help someone understand our map a little bit better. We also have that station's location in the form of longitude and latitude. We're going to go ahead and use those particular columns to create spatial objects that we're actually then going to put on a map too. At the end here, we have a few more columns of information, some of which contain categorical variables and some of which are numeric. We're going to use 2 of these columns today. The first being line. This is a categorical variable that essentially says, hey, this is the group that this particular station belongs to. So the Lancaster station is part of the Antelope Valley line. The Santa Clarita station is part of the Antelope Valley line as well. Other stations, such as Santa Ana, is part of the Orange County line. And as part of our map, what we're going to want to see are those different stations that belong to each line. We want to see them displayed as a different color. So that way we can get a nice visual display of the different lines across Southern California. We're also interested in this column that's called daily average ridership. This is a numeric variable that says this is how many riders access or ride from that station on a daily basis on average. And what we're going to want to use this column for is to display which stations have the most popular, right? Are the most popular. Which ones have the highest average daily ridership and which ones are towards the lower end, which ones aren't used as frequently. And we want to see that on a color gradient. So today we're going to go ahead and build out 2 separate maps. One to show you how to map a thematic field that is a categorical variable, and then another one to show you a numeric variable. First, as we go into our workflow, we're going to explore the first 2 report map tools that are pre-configured for you as part of the starting workflow. And then we'll go ahead and really dive into that content about how you might want to display and customize the legend for each particular map. So as you can see, as part of our mapping process, that we've already gone ahead and created a spatial object that represents the location of that metro station, and that is the spatial object that we're going to connect into each of our report maps. You can see that I've built out 2, and I've done that so that way we can build out a separate map for our categorical variable or our metro lines. And then I've gone ahead and built out a separate one for our ridership. That's our numeric variable. Well, why do we need to build out 2 separate maps, and what's the difference in configurations between those 2 maps that you've got set up here on your screen? Well, let's go ahead and dive in and take a look. I'm first going to click on this top one for our metro lines, which is where we're mapping our categorical variable. I've left everything by default on the Settings tab. That's the first tab of the Report Map tool. However, on the second tab here for data, you can see that I've configured my connecting or my incoming spatial object. Metro stations, right, is the name of that incoming connection. I've configured that the spatial field that we're going to map, in this case I only have one, it's just points, as represented by the column centroid. But you can see that I've selected a thematic field. And the thematic field that I've selected here is that categorical variable. It's going to be line, right? Or I've also selected a label field, station ID, just something to visually display what station is this on the map, so that way people can read it quickly and easily. So the thematic field here is really going to be the one area that determines on the next tab, in the Layers tab, how we want to display that data. So because that variable is categorical, I've gone ahead and made some decisions on the layers map as a result of that configuration. And one of them is found if I click into the metro stations layer, the theme. Because I'm working with a categorical variable, my tiling method is set to unique value. For every tile or for every value that's unique in that column line, I want to go ahead and assign those values a different color. So, because I'm working with that categorical variable, I did select map as my color method. You'll see that in our next map, ridership, where we're working with a numeric variable, that I've selected ramp. And I'll talk a little bit about why at that point in time. But for the categorical variable, I've selected map. So that way for every value in that line or in that line column, every value is going to get assigned a unique color. And you can certainly customize colors as well. This is one really fun aspect of creating a map, is that you can actually select this drop-down menu and then select a different spectrum of colors that you might want to use for your mapping purposes. I went ahead and selected my favorite, which is summer, to apply to my map. Now, before we jump over to the Legends tab, I'm just going to go ahead and jump on over to our ridership map, so that way we can see the differences in configuration thus far before we dive into actually customizing our legend. So remember that our ridership values are numeric values, right? How many riders on average are taking off from a particular metro station on a daily basis. So some things do remain the same between the two maps, such as everything on the Settings tab. I've left that by default the way it is. The Data tab also similar. I'm connecting in my spatial object that I want to map, but I've picked a different thematic field, which is that daily average ridership. Again, numeric, right? I want to see which stations have the highest number of daily average riders and which other stations are not as popular with our ridership. I've gone ahead and also selected the same label ID, so the station ID can also be applied to this map. Now let's look at the Layers tab to see the differences in the thematic display between our categorical variable, or our lines, and now our numeric variable, which is our ridership. I'm going to go ahead and expand the layer ridership and then click on theme. And notice here that because I'm working with a numeric variable, I have a whole spectrum of options here, ranking from high all the way down to low. And you can see I have high, above average, average, below average, and then finally low. Because I'm working with a numeric variable here, I've selected Smart Tile as my tiling methods. And as you can see in the drop-down menu, you certainly have many options available to you. And because I'm working with a numeric variable, I've selected the color method of ramp. When you're working with numeric variables, you'll typically see two techniques used in terms of displaying values on a color spectrum. And one is working within one very similar color, say light blue to dark blue, to indicate a lower value and a higher value, such as maybe very low average rainfall all the way to very high average rainfall. You could also work within a color spectrum that starts and ends on two essentially opposite colors in the color spectrum. For example, in this case, green and red, or blue and orange or yellow, something that shows a really wide variety of colors. Still the same idea. One color represents a lower end of values and another color represents a higher end of values, but just two different techniques to use for display purposes. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and select a start color of, let's say, light blue. And I'm going to choose an end color of, I'll go dark orange. As I select my starting colors and ending colors here, you'll see that my theme automatically gets updated here. Notice that high, above average, average, below average, and low are the values that Alteryx Designer essentially chooses for you to represent that category. And as we see, as in just a moment, as we run these maps through, this is something that we are going to want to edit in terms of customizing our legend. Instead of having high, above average, average, below average, and low, for example, you might want to see the actual values associated with those ranges that have been created. And that's one thing that we'll go ahead and do today as we build out and customize our legends. So I'll go ahead and jump back up to our metro stations map, or our metro lines, so that way that we can go ahead and start building out and showing how we can customize the text that's displayed as part of the legend. Both of these maps are going to be configured the exact same way today in terms of the Legends tab. By default, the Legends tab is set to lay out a legend to the right. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this really quickly so that way you can see what that means. And when we apply a different configuration option, how that impacts what you've done. So I'll go ahead and click Browse here. And as you can see, I have columns of data. I have the map and the bounding rectangle that's output by the Report Map tool. So in this one reporting snippet, this map, you can see that my legend here is laid out to the right-hand side of my map. Now let's take a look at the text that's actually here. You can see metro stations dash the name of the line. And that happens for every single line that we have. As part of our map customization and editing process, one thing that we're going to do is remove that text, metro stations dash. So that way our legend just has the values of the different lines that we've actually mapped here today. Is picking up these particular values from the name of the incoming connection string, metro stations. So you can see how you might want this, especially if you're connecting multiple strings into a single map tool. But in this case, because it's just redundant information, we really just want to get rid of it. However, the first part, before we can actually start the editing process and getting rid of that extra information, first, we actually need to configure our legend a little bit differently. Before we can take apart the legend, we need to output the legend as its own reporting map snippet. We're going to use this position drop-down menu to lay out the legend as a separate field. You see that we do have a few different options. We could lay out to the right or lay out to the left, right, and just have the one single map reporting snippet. We could also just not have a legend at all, just have a map. Or we could lay out the legend as its own reporting snippet. And to make any edits or any customizations, that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to select separate field here in this drop-down menu, and I'm just going to rerun this workflow again so you can see the difference in our output now. In the Browse tool, you can see that instead of 2 columns like we had before, now we have 3. We have a report map snippet for the map, and we have a reporting snippet for the legend by itself. We still have that bounding rectangle. But the fact that we have 2 reporting snippets, one for the map and one for the legend, lets us move on to our next step, which is splitting the legend into values that we can actually use and edit and parse. So from the reporting tool palette, I'm going to go ahead and start with that splitting process. I'm going to drag a map legend splitter tool onto the canvas here and just connect it right after my map. Now this has got to be one of the easiest tool configurations in the reporting tool palette. All you have to do here in the legend splitter tool is just pick the reporting or the column that holds the reporting snippet for the legend. So if I select this drop-down menu, you'll see I have 2 options to select. I can either pick map or I can pick legend, and I want to pick legend. So I'll rerun this workflow one more time. And you'll see the difference now when I output all the values from this legend. It doesn't look like a reporting snippet anymore. Instead, you can see that we've actually pulled out all the values that are part of that legend, such as the text and even the image, the theme name, the theme band, other information such as the text style and image style that's actually used to create that reporting snippet. But these values right here in the text, these are exactly the column of data that we want to be working with to modify to display on our legend. So now we're relying on a couple of different just parsing and string formatting functions to make sure that the text that we want to display, metro stations dash value, really is displayed the way we want it to. So I'm just going to go ahead and use one of my favorite functions to just simply remove metro stations dash from the first part of this text column. I'm just going to use a formula tool to do it. I'm just going to drag a formula tool onto my canvas, just insert it here into my data stream. And I'm just going to run a function that edits the values in the column text. And one of my favorites, especially if it's something simple, like I just need to get rid of the same text, right, from the same column, is the replace function. So I'm just going to go ahead and in my expression editor here, just start typing replace and then select the function replace that comes up automatically for me. I'll fill in my parameters here. The column that I want to modify is text. The target string that I want to remove is going to be metro stations space dash space space dash space. And the text I want to replace it with is, well, just nothing. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in with quotes to just say nothing. And as you can see in my data preview, already that first value looks much better and much cleaner. Rather than Metro Stations dash Antelope Valley, it's just Antelope Valley now. So I'll just run it so that way we can just see the values changing in our text field. It's already looking much better. Antelope Valley, Inland Empire, much cleaner. Also helps us save some space on our legend. So now that I have the text displayed in a way that I want it to show on my map, I'm ready to put my legend back together. Time for that Map Legend Builder tool. So back in my reporting tool palette here, I'll go ahead and select the Map Legend Builder and just put it right here in my data stream right after my formula tool. Again, a really easy configuration. All you have to do is match the column names from your text or from your incoming data stream to the columns that your Map Legend Builder tool is expecting. So the text field should be called text. All you have to do is just select in your drop-down menus the ones that match. So image to image, text style to text style, image style to image style. Those are really the essential columns that your map is, or that your map builder is going to need to recompile that reporting snippet. So I'll rerun my workflow again. And you'll see that now instead of data values, I'm back to just having a reporting snippet. And if you take a look in your Browse Tools configuration window here on the left-hand side, you can see that your legend now looks a whole lot cleaner, right? A single line of text for every metro line that's going to be included on your map. So now, remember, we want to put this legend back on our map. You can see that we've lost it, right? We no longer have that map reporting snippet that we had created as part of our map. So what we're going to go ahead and do is join these two snippets back together. I'm just going to go ahead and search for a join tool and drag it onto my canvas. I'm going to go ahead and insert it right here after my legend builder. And then I'm going to join on the right-hand side. I'm going to bring my map back over here. And I'm going to join it to the right-hand side. Now, because I just want these reporting snippets to live side by side, I need them all to be in the same row, but I need these snippets to be in different columns, I'm going to use one of my favorite configuration options for the join tool, which is simply just to join my values by record position. That's going to take whatever is included on line 1 here from my map tool, so my snippet for my map, my legend, and my bounding rectangle, and it's just going to join it with my newly created legend. So I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup as well here in my join tool. I'm going to make sure that I get rid of that legend that's coming in from the right-hand side because that no longer represents my updated legend that I want to use. I'm also just going to go ahead and get rid of the bounding rectangle because I'm not going to need that for my next part or any part of the report that I plan to build. So we'll go ahead and run the workflow again so that way we can see our two snippets next to each other in a single data stream. And sure enough, here we have legend and we have map. And this puts us ready for our next step, which is putting the legend back on top of the map. And if I'm planning a little bit, taking a little gander here at my map, where I would love to see this legend fall is right here on this bottom left-hand corner of my map. So you can see anywhere else it might go, maybe the top left would be okay, but I'd probably be in danger of cutting off some of these metro stations that exist over here towards Ventura area. And I don't really want to put it anywhere on the right. If I put it on the bottom here, it's just going to look a little too crowded. And at the right top corner here, it's just not going to look very good. I don't think there's enough space there either. I might risk cutting off some of these particular metro stations located out east. So I'm going to go ahead and land it right here in the bottom left-hand corner of my map. Use some of that real estate very smartly. So to go ahead and then just layer different reporting snippets on top of each other. So first putting your map and then putting your legend on top of that. Remember our final tool in the sequence, and that's our overlay tool. So I'm going to grab that from my canvas, drag it on into my workflow, and select the two things I need, the base field and then any layer I want to include on top of that base. So in this top drop down up here at the top, I'm going to select my base. And in this case, this is going to be my map, because anything I stack, like my legend, is going to go on top of my map. So I'll have my base set as my map, and then I pick simply where I want to land that other snippet or that legend. I can pick the top left, the center, the top right, somewhere in the middle, or somewhere on the bottom. And I think that this bottom left-hand corner is going to be my best option. So using that drop-down menu that's associated with that particular quadrant, I'll just go ahead and select Legend. So we'll go ahead and rerun this workflow so that way we can see exactly what's happened. And it looks like right here, my legend has fallen right here in the left-hand corner of my map, which is a much better look, I think, for my map, which is a much better look. Definitely the map legend is much cleaner looking without all that extra text that we don't really need. And it's definitely informative while still letting the values of my map really take center stage here. So great, now that we have our first map with our categorical variable, let's go ahead and see how some of these techniques translate, or maybe how we want to change our approach with customizing a map when we're looking at a numeric variable. So remember here in our map that we've mapped our daily average ridership. You can see here that because of our map, or with our map configuration, we do have a map with a separate legend as a field, or map with a legend as a separate reporting snippet as its own field, which is great for our process, as well as that bounding rectangle. But let's take a look at the text that's actually in the legend here. You can see that we're working with a couple of different things now. We definitely still have that text that we want to remove, ridership dash high, or ridership dash above average. So very similar to what we did before, we want to get rid of that text that really doesn't mean a whole lot for us. But you can also see that we have those values, high, above a certain value, or between a range of values. We really want to have those ranges of values be the text that's displayed in our legend. That's what's going to make the most sense for the consumer of our map. So let's go ahead and start splitting our legend apart with that goal in mind. So just as before, I'm going to go ahead and drag a splitter onto my canvas. Very similar process. I'm just going to make sure that legend is selected here in my dropdown, and then run. So that way then we can start strategizing how we're going to take care of this text that's part of our legend here. So as you can see in the text column here, just like the column that we were working with before, has the text of the actual connection string name, so ridership space dash space, but then it has the value it's been assigned, high, above average, average, below average, or low. And then in parentheses, you can see like those are the actual values that we want our users to see on our map. We want them to understand the range of values that each color in the spectrum represents. And you can see that this band, right, this range of the starting value and ending value is also included in other columns that's broken out from the legend splitter. So there's a lot of opportunity here to work with lots of different data values to customize your map legend to display the way that you would like it to. In this case, we're just simply going to work with this text column one more time with a little different approach. One of my other favorite of working with parsing data is using regex. And in the formula tool, you have lots of regular expression capabilities that you can apply to help make your text look even more beautiful. So just like we did before, drag down a formula tool and put it into my workflow here. So before we start executing on our regex, let's just take a look at what exactly we're after here. What I want displayed in my map is simply all the text that's inside the parentheses. So I'm going to create a regular expression to simply match the text that says any character through the first parentheses. Then grab me all the text that's inside that parentheses and then drop the last closing parentheses. So in my formula tool, I will do just that. Just like how we did before, I will modify the actual values that are found in the column text. And I'm going to apply a function, the regex replace function, which you can see requires a few parameters here. We're going to give it the string, the pattern to match, and then what we want to replace the text with. So I will go ahead and enter the column we want to modify, which is text. And the pattern I want to match is everything up to that first parentheses. Grab me anything that's in the parentheses and then drop the final one. So regular expressions do need to be quoted, so I'll start with that. And I will build starting with give me all the characters up until that first parentheses, which because it is a character that's used in regular expressions, it does need to be escaped. We escape that character with a backslash parentheses. And then I want to create a marked group. Remember, I want anything that's in that set of parentheses. So I'm going to say parentheses, asterisk parentheses to say, give me anything that's in there. That's going to be my marked group that I replace or use to replace my text. And then I want to drop that last parentheses. So I'm going to do another backslash, close parentheses, and end the quote. That is my whole regular expression that matches the text that's in that column text. So now for my replacement text, it's essentially saying, okay, well, in its place, what do you want to put there? And remember, I want to keep anything that was inside that set of parentheses, which I called a marked group. And in this case, because I only have one, I'm just going to say insert $1, end parentheses, which calls that marked group, uses that block of text as the replacement text inside there. And as you can see in my data preview, all of a sudden that first line of data, instead of having daily average ridership, space, dash, space, parentheses, the values inside, all of a sudden I've replaced it with just the values inside those parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and run this workflow so that way we can see how it's been applied to that whole column called text. And you can see here that all my values now have been pulled out in that column text. Much better text for my legend, I think, instead of high, above average, average, below average, low with some values in parentheses. Let's just give our users or the users of our map these specific values. And now, just as you've seen before, we're pretty much home free. I'm just going to go ahead and rebuild this legend back up. Legend builder. Looks like all my columns have mapped appropriately, so we're home free there. I'll just go ahead and start in with the next steps. Drag in a join. Remember, because I've lost my map snippet, I will go ahead and join that back in. Same technique. Join by position. Get rid of the columns I don't need, such as the legend from the right side of my join tool and the bounding rectangle as well. I'll go ahead and run that just so we can make sure everything is okay up to this point. Already looking much better. And then the final step, just making sure it gets put back on the map. I'm going to go ahead and land it in the same position, bottom left-hand corner. I'll drag on an overlay tool. Select my base field as map. And the bottom left-hand corner, go ahead and add in legend. Run it again, and now I should have two really good-looking maps that just have that much more polish to them because the map legend has been nicely formatted and placed in a nice visible place on the map, but yet doesn't disrupt anything that's actually important data and important information that I've chosen to share with my map. As you continue to learn and expand your skills with Designer, know that you have support along the way. The Alteryx community is a wonderful resource where you can find discussion forums, knowledge-based articles, and blogs to answer your questions, and even inspire you to ask the questions you didn't even know you had. Use the Alteryx Academy to continue your learning of the Alteryx platform, participate in weekly challenges, and push your skills with our product certification exams. And then finally, for those tough questions that just don't have an answer on Community, please reach out to our customer support team.